In this tutorial we're going to cover the Rider Designer portion of this software, and it's probably the most difficult thing to get right, mostly because everybody has a different shape and we have one body shape here, and we're saying all these parts will suffice. You might not think so on the outside, but I really believe so, and I'm going to try to explain why. First, let's go over to the Rider Designer and let's talk about him for just a second. We can pick out different parts of the rider by left-clicking the parts. However, we can only move the rider by left-clicking the pelvis and holding down the left mouse button and dragging him. We are allowed to rotate all the parts of the rider by left-clicking to select and then right dragging to rotate the part. Whenever you've made some change to your rider, and in this case I'm going to move the rider a little bit closer to the crank, you must click the export, and that's really important. We basically have three applications rolled into one here. Rather than have to, if you were using three distinct applications, you'd have to save the files, go to the other application, load the files. I didn't automatically update all your changes to all three things at one time. I made you have to click an export button, but it sure is a lot better than some of the other ways you might have to do this. But click the export and go over to shell, and we can see that our rider has gotten a little bit closer to his crank. I'm holding down the right mouse button and spinning around to look here, and you can see the tug marks. I'm going to turn those off. But I'm still dragging him even though I can't see him. And what I'm doing here is holding down the left mouse. And this has changed, by the way. Warren said it was kind of hard on a laptop to run the control and the mouse drag at the same time. So this created quite a bit of complications, believe it or not, because every time you go over to, if you open a project file, guess what you got to do last? Click open, and guess what you've just done? You've dragged your, you had a mouse click show up on this screen whenever you ended that. You still had your mouse down as you left up, and that click dragged that nose over to wherever your mouse was. So what I'd do is I'd load that file and I'd get something that looked like this. And I go, what? Well, anyway, I went back and made a lockout. Whenever you load a file, you can't, your mouse clicks are locked out till you release the mouse once. So I'm not dragging till I release, and now I am dragging. So anyway, back on the Rider Designer, let's talk about how we're going to get our body into shape. Now, what we're going to be looking for is in the shell, I'm going to show the vertices. I'm going to turn off those tug marks. And you can see some little bitty blue ticks around here. There's one up on top of the head. These are the points of interest. And you'll notice this blue tick here comes about to where the knee comes up all the way. I take a look at the rider extremes. I can see here that the knee is showing me where its location is in space whenever it reaches its max Y. And that location is, this may not be very easy for a lot of people to do, but I don't know any easy way to talk about three-dimensional relationships other than giving you an X, Y, Z. And X in this case is along this axis, negative here, positive here. And Z will be out towards you, closer to you, and Y will be vertical, plus Y in the vertical, in the higher direction. So over here, let's take a look at the knee. We see the knee is 13.4 inches. Now what's that 13.4 inches mean? Well, I had to give you a relative point. I've got to be measuring from something. And I figured the best thing I can do is give you a measurement from the crank. So if you had someone helping you, you could sit down on your recumbent and pedal to your knees as high as it goes and try to measure X, Y, and Z to the top of your knee. And if you see a number that looks like this, you know that you've got your leg and crank set up about right. And you can do that for all the body parts. And let's take a look. Let's say, for instance, that we had measured that our knee was coming up at 15 inches high here. Well, there's probably a lot of ways we can do this because we're going to be talking in conjunction with all these other numbers here. But let's go over to the Rider Designer and let's just move him up a little bit. Let's export him. Go back over to the Shell Designer, and it just pushed his knee up. Let's see what that is. The knee is now 14.9 inches, so we successfully moved his knee up. And all we did there was adjust his position on the frame. So adjusting the position is part of it. This isn't going to be easy, but I don't know a way to make it easy, so You know, it's just something we're going to have to live with. But let's go over here and let's talk about this rider. First of all, let's reset him and start from scratch. The biggest rider you can make is 6'10", and it's shown up here by showing the 82 inches, and I'm going to change the length here. I'll make it 18 inches, and I'm going to shorten him up, and I'm going to press the click on here and press the escape key, and it's resized him, it's checked, and he's now 6'9.8" inches tall. And I did that by shortening his legs. But I'm going to click his pelvis, and I'm going to move him by moving the pelvis because it's the only thing we can move, and I'm holding down the left mouse button and dragging it. I'm dragging him over closer to the crank. Now I'm holding down the right mouse button and dragging to rotate him. I'm doing that for the torso, putting the arms up into place. And I do honor these positions that you put the arms in and the torso in and the pelvis in and the head in, but the legs are actually positioned so that they fit on the crank. I'm going to go ahead and rotate them so we can see them. And the other thing that's honored is the position of the foot, the angle that you put the foot at. So you may want to kind of move him up to the crank so you kind of see what that angle looks like. Let's move him a little bit farther away. And what I'm going to do here is shorten him up a little bit. That length is a bit big for me. I'm going to make it 16, and I'm going to go to his ankle, and I'm going to make it 16. It might be a little sharp for me, but go over to the foot. Several things on the foot. The foot's kind of a complicated thing, but one is the angle, which we're just going to set by doing this. That looks like about the angle I think I want. The length that's listed here is actually the length from the center of the pedal to your ankle joint. I need to know these movable parts and where they're connected together. It's kind of like having a whole bunch of U-joints hooked to socket extensions, and I need to know where these U-joints are at in space, so that's why that length is in there. I'm going to set that for 6. That might be a little bit hard to measure, but you can get the job done. I can do it, and you can do it. You measure from about where your ankle knuckles at down to the center of your pedal, and you're only looking at it from the side. You don't care about angling right and left and in and out to get it. Just straight up from the side like this 2D picture shows. The length from heel to toe, that's basically what your shoe looks like from heel to toe, and that's important because that's going to give us where our toe pokes out of the shell and where our heel pokes out of the shell. And the width is particularly important because it's going to give us where the toe knuckle on our little toe pokes out the side whenever you pedal farthest forward. If you're really trying to design a tight shell, you may be coming in danger in your rider box area for your knuckle of your little toe to hit the side of the shell when you're all the way forward. So what I do is I look for the maximum forward point of the foot, and then I record the XYZ location of the ball of the knuckle of the foot, and when it's all the way forward. And just for your interest, the way that I know where these points are at is I'm going to go over to the developer designer, and I'm going to type in the top secret password of Battle Mountain here, all lowercase. But you didn't hear that from me. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to load the left foot in this case, and you have to know the right things. It may actually blow up. This is, for me, this isn't intended to be friendly. There's the left thigh. I'm going to go back to the left foot and load it. And I'm going to kind of spin around so I can see the foot a little bit better. I'm going to go over here and start clicking blue verdicts. And what this is it's making, let me get one out here, it's kind of easy to see. There we go. What it did was make the point that is exactly right there perfectly blue. Now that particular point is connected to 1, 2, 3, 4 other points, which means it makes 1, 2, 3 more triangles with it. Actually, a 4th triangle over here. 4 triangles to make these shades. And what the DirectX libraries do is say, okay, this point was colored a human color, and this point was colored blue, so I'll just fade the color from one to the other, so it just blends it in there for you. But I know that the bluest part is the part of the point that I'm looking for. I'm taking a look here. Finding the knuckle. I'm getting close. That's probably the point that I use for the toe knuckle. So that's the widest point. But anyway, back over on the rider designer, I find those points, and that's what I look for. So I'm going to shorten up his arms here. They look kind of large. 11. Oops. forearms smaller. Mine are actually. And that head's a little bit large for me. That length is kind of large. And that pelvis is kind of large. That should be about 6. Now the femur gap, that's what's used to set how far apart your legs are. Whoops, I just dragged something crazy. The pelvis, I think. Straighten him back up. The femur gap, that's the distance between these two joints. That's kind of hard to estimate, but you just do your best. And it doesn't really matter because you're going to end up playing with this anyway. And the way you're going to play with it is I'm going to type in 20 here, something kind of wide, so I'm going to be really spread out a little here. And I'm going to expect that and go over to the shell designer and take a look at my thigh from above. What I'm going to do is I'm going to push that blue mark out until it matches what my real width is at my pelvic area, out on my where my thighs attach. That's about the point we're talking about here. The fattest part of your thigh. And what did that get to? That's the hip. And we can see that in the hip area we've moved that distance out to 12.4 inches. And why is that not exactly the same? We said 20 inches. Well, 20 inches is where we made the joint, and your thigh is not infinitely thin, so the point has moved out another 2.5 inches to cover the width of your thigh from your hip joint to the outside of your thigh. But you can measure that and you can play with that width until you get that point to be where you're at, where you really are in space. And then again, you'd be measuring this on your own recumbent, but anyway, when you get that right, you can say, okay, that's really where my blue mark is. So now in the shell designer here, and I'm going to show the tug marks, I'm going to pick out the right or low point, and I'm going to drag that out wider until I fit in that darn thing. Darn if I don't. You can see the shell got quite a bit bigger. As a matter of fact, it was about 400 square inches. I'm going to do an analysis on it. We've increased its size by almost 50% just because we've got a fat rump. Does this shell make my rump look big? But anyway, back on the rider designer. Let's set that femur gap something more realistic. 10's probably a pretty good number. Now we've got some other angles in here that's kind of crazy. The elbows outside, you know, not particular. You can probably change your arm angles a little bit. I'm going to make that 10, and I'm going to go to the hands, and I'm going to push the hands outside a little bit closer together. Let's make them 7. And I'm going to export that and go over to the shell designer and look at it from above. You can see my hands. I also drag the shape of him up, but you can see my hands got closer together. You can see the center line's right about here, and my hands are almost at the center line. Basically what I have there for a fist is a ball. I just kind of put a ball over the top of the hand, and I think that's a 3-inch ball, but I say your fist are 3-inch balls, and you just kind of move to your fist, don't poke in. But I think that's one of the most. I'm not too worried about making a blue tick for that for the rider extremes, because I think you can design your shells to make your turning inside the shell. It would surprise me if somebody made their steering. We have to make another foot taller so we can fit our steering inside. So I'm not even going to worry about that. If that's a worry, I'll show you how to do that. So you just send me, type it up in a forum, or get a hold of Warren and get my email address, which is okay. Anybody he deems is okay to give it out to is fine with me too. But and I'll email you privately and tell you how to actually do this yourself. But anyway, over here I'm going to move those arms down a little bit. In my particular one, my hands actually go between my knees. I have 2 control sticks to go forward and backwards to turn mine. And export that, and back over in the shell designer, and we see our hands are now inside. So that's basically what you do to make your rider. And I'm going to unclick show vertex axis, and watch. What I want you to watch is the little blue marks are going to get pushed up as this thing finds the highest place, and it drops them off when it hits the maximum. I'm going to do that again so you know what you're looking for. Watch the ball. Watch the toe in particular. It's kind of easy to see it pushing it up. Dropped off the heel, dropped off the toe, and dropped off the ball of the foot at the first thing. So that's kind of neat. I thought about making a little box here, but you really don't need the box. These are going to be the extremes that you're going to be trying to enclose for most guys, I think. Alright, the next tutorial will be on how to build a shell.